The morning was quiet in the small town of Richmond. The sun was just beginning to rise, spilling soft light across the brick streets and old-fashioned lampposts. A little coffee shop named Mary's Place stood on the corner, filled with the smell of roasted beans, warm muffins, and the kind of comfort people searched for before starting their day. Inside the shop, the tables were polished but scratched with years of stories. The walls carried pictures of smiling families, faded newspaper articles about the town's history, and a chalkboard menu written in cheerful handwriting. The place was not fancy, but it had heart. It was the kind of shop where regular customers felt like family, and strangers were welcomed with kindness. Behind the counter stood Angela, a young waitress with calm eyes and a warm smile. She had worked there for years, balancing trays, pouring coffee, and listening to the quiet whispers of people's lives. Life had not been easy for her. She was raising her younger brother, working double shifts and holding on to her dreams quietly, without letting anyone see how heavy her struggles really were. Angela believed in strength, in dignity, and in kindness. Yet she often wondered if life would ever give her a chance to breathe. That morning, the bell above the door rang and a man stepped inside. He looked simple enough. His clothes were plain, almost too plain, as though he didn't want anyone to notice him. A dark jacket, a pair of worn jeans, and shoes that had seen better days. He kept his head low, almost as if he was hiding from the world. But there was something about him, something Angela noticed right away. His walk had a confidence that couldn't be hidden, and his eyes, though calm, carried the weight of someone who had seen more than most people ever would. His name was Michael, though nobody in town knew his full story. They didn't know that he was a billionaire, the kind of man whose decisions could move industries, create jobs, and change futures. He had built empires quietly, never one to boast about wealth. But today, Michael wasn't here as the billionaire he was. He was undercover, searching for something money couldn't buy: truth, connection, and maybe a reason to keep believing in people. He walked up to the counter, and Angela greeted him with her usual kindness. "Good morning," she said, offering him a menu. Michael looked at her, surprised by the warmth in her tone. Many people, when they sensed wealth, often treated him differently. But Angela didn't know who he was, and so she treated him just like anyone else. "I'll have a coffee," Michael said simply. "Black." Angela nodded, writing it down even though she didn't need to. She always wrote orders. It was her way of staying organized. As she turned to prepare his drink, Michael studied her. There was something about the way she moved, graceful, strong, and yet carrying a quiet tiredness, as though life had tested her too many times but never broken her. When she returned with the steaming cup, their hands brushed for a second. Angela smiled politely and placed the cup in front of him. "Here you go. Fresh and strong," she said. Michael gave a small nod. "Thank you." He took a sip, letting the warmth spread through him. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. But just as he was about to pull out his wallet, Angela did something unexpected. She slipped a folded piece of paper across the counter, her eyes meeting his for only a moment before she turned away to serve another customer. Michael froze. He stared at the note, his mind racing. He had lived through boardroom battles, billion-dollar deals, and political games. Yet this small slip of paper, given so quietly by a stranger, made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. He picked it up slowly, his hand steady, but his heart pounding. Unfolding it, he saw the words written in simple handwriting. "I don't know who you are, but I see the heaviness in your eyes. Whatever it is you carry, don't give up. The world still needs you." Michael read it twice, then 3 times. The words stopped him cold. No one had ever written something like this to him. Not without knowing who he was, not without expecting something in return. It was raw, real, and deeply human. He looked up at Angela. She was laughing with another customer, her face lit by genuine kindness. She wasn't watching him, wasn't asking for anything. She had simply seen something in his eyes and chosen to speak to it. For the first time in years, Michael felt seen, not as a billionaire, not as a powerful man, but as a human being. He slipped the note into his jacket pocket, his mind spinning. Why had she given it to him? How could she see what even people closest to him couldn't? As the morning moved on, Michael stayed longer than he planned. He watched Angela work, noticing how she treated everyone the same, with patience, respect, and kindness. She remembered people's names, asked about their families, and made each person feel important. And yet, he also noticed the small details others missed. The way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was looking. The way she pressed her lips together when bills were mentioned. The tiredness in her eyes that even her smile couldn't fully hide. Michael realized that Angela, too, was carrying her own heaviness. And yet, despite her struggles, she chose to lift others. When he finally stood to leave, he placed more money on the counter than the coffee was worth. Angela noticed but didn't comment, only thanking him with the same sincerity she gave every customer. As he walked out the door, the note in his pocket seemed to burn with meaning. He had come to this town looking for answers, and maybe, just maybe, he had just found the beginning of one. That night, as Michael sat in the small motel room he had rented under a false name, he pulled out the note again. The words echoed in his mind, breaking through the walls he had built around himself. Don't give up. The world still needs you. He thought of Angela, of her quiet strength, of the way she had seen him without knowing anything about him, and for the first time in years, Michael felt something shift inside him. Maybe this wasn't just chance. Maybe this was the start of something bigger, and he knew one thing for certain. He would return to Mary's place tomorrow. The next morning arrived quietly in Richmond. The small town moved at its usual slow rhythm, children with backpacks walking to school, shopkeepers unlocking doors, and neighbors waving to each other as though life had never learned how to rush here. Michael sat in his motel room, staring at the folded note on the small wooden table. He had read it so many times that he could have recited the words by heart. It was strange how such a simple message written in ordinary ink had shaken something deep inside him. Don't give up. The world still needs you. Those words had kept him awake most of the night. For years he had lived in a world where people only cared about what he could give them: money, connections, power. He had forgotten what it felt like to be spoken to as if he were just a man, nothing more and nothing less. He folded the note carefully and slipped it back into his jacket. Something inside him told him he needed to see Angela again, not just to thank her, but to understand why she had written it in the first place. When he stepped into Mary's place, the bell above the door rang just as it had the day before. The smell of coffee and warm bread wrapped around him like comfort. Customers sat at their usual spots, reading newspapers, chatting in low voices, or tapping quietly on laptops. Angela was there, moving gracefully between tables, balancing a tray with practiced ease. She looked tired, but her smile didn't falter. She noticed Michael almost instantly, her eyes widening for just a moment before she quickly composed herself. "Back again?" she asked when he reached the counter. Michael gave a small nod. The coffee was good, strong. Angela smiled, her eyes soft. "I'll get you another. Black, right?" "Yes." As she prepared his drink, Michael studied her again. She was different from anyone he had met in years. She didn't rush, didn't pretend, and didn't wear masks the way people in his world always did. Everything about her felt honest. When she returned with his coffee, Michael hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I read the note." Angela's hand froze for just a second before she forced herself to keep moving. She placed the cup down gently and looked at him. Her voice was calm, but there was a faint nervousness hidden beneath. "I'm sorry if that was out of line. I don't know." "I felt like I needed to say it." Michael shook his head. "Don't be sorry. It meant more than you think." For a moment, silence lingered between them. Then another customer called for Angela, and she left quickly, almost relieved to have an excuse. Michael sat down at a corner table, sipping his coffee slowly, his mind full of questions. Why had she noticed the heaviness in his eyes when so many others had ignored it? And what kind of heaviness was she carrying herself? As the morning went on, Michael stayed longer than before. He watched Angela manage the rush with calm patience. She remembered everyone's orders without checking the notepad, gave extra napkins before people asked, and even slipped a cookie into a child's hand when the little boy started to cry. But he also noticed things most customers overlooked. The way she rubbed her wrist when it ached from carrying heavy trays, the way her smile dimmed for a split second whenever someone mentioned family, the way she pressed her lips tightly when she thought about money. There was a story behind her eyes, and Michael wanted to know it. When the crowd finally thinned, he stood and approached the counter again. Angela was wiping it down, humming softly to herself. "Can I ask you something?" Michael said quietly. Angela looked up, a little cautious. Sure. Why did you write that note? Angela hesitated. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Because I know what it looks like when someone is carrying something heavy inside. I've seen it in the mirror too many times. And when I saw it in your eyes, I couldn't just stay quiet. Michael studied her carefully. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't asking for anything. She was simply being honest. You were right, Michael said finally. I do carry things. Things that feel heavier than they should. But no one has ever said something like that to me before. Angela gave a small smile. Sometimes people just need to hear it. Even the strongest ones. For a moment, Michael wanted to tell her everything. About his empire, his losses, the betrayals, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who wanted only what he could give. But he stopped himself. It wasn't the right time. She saw him as a man, not a billionaire, and for once he wanted to keep it that way. Instead, he said, "Thank you. You gave me more than you know." Angela didn't reply, only nodded softly as though she understood. Michael left shortly after, but this time he didn't go straight back to the motel. He walked through the town instead, noticing things he had overlooked before. The children's laughter, the old man feeding birds by the fountain, the painted murals on brick walls. It was as if Angela's note had opened his eyes to the beauty he had forgotten to see. That evening he sat in his room again, thinking about her words and her kindness. He realized something that made his chest tighten. Angela wasn't just kind, she was strong, stronger than most people he had ever known. And yet she was still here, working in a small-town cafe, carrying struggles he couldn't yet see. For the first time in years, Michael didn't feel like the one with all the power. Instead, he felt like the one who had something to learn. And as he lay down to rest, one thought echoed in his mind. Tomorrow he wouldn't just come back for coffee. Tomorrow he would try to understand Angela's story, because something told him her story mattered. The morning air was cool, and the streets of Richmond carried the quiet hum of life beginning again. Michael walked slowly toward Mary's place, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. He had spent most of the night turning over thoughts in his mind. Angela's words still echoed in his chest, not just the note but the way she had spoken to him the day before. So genuine, so unguarded. He had promised himself that today would be different. Today he wouldn't just sit quietly sipping his coffee. Today he wanted to understand her. When he entered the cafe, Angela was already behind the counter. She glanced up and for a moment her eyes softened. There was no surprise in her face this time, almost as though she had expected him. "You're becoming a regular," she said with a smile. Michael chuckled. "I guess I am. Black coffee, please." She nodded and began preparing it, but Michael stayed near the counter instead of heading to his usual corner. He leaned slightly, watching her work. "You always seem so calm," he said quietly. "Even when the place is busy," Angela laughed lightly. "That's the trick. If I look calm, customers feel calm. But inside, it's usually a storm." Michael tilted his head. "A storm?" She set the cup in front of him and sighed softly. "Life doesn't exactly make things easy, but you can't let people see the cracks. You just keep moving, keep smiling." Michael studied her carefully. He had met CEOs, leaders, and visionaries who hid their cracks behind walls of power. Yet Angela, with no wealth or influence, carried the same strength. He took a sip of his coffee before asking, "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" Angela's smile faded slightly, though her eyes stayed steady. "Every day. But what choice do I have? My brother depends on me. Rent doesn't pay itself. Dreams don't put food on the table." Her voice was calm, but the weight in her words pressed against Michael's chest. He wanted to ask more, but another customer stepped up and Angela had to leave. Michael sat at his corner table watching her move through the cafe again. This time he didn't just see her as a kind waitress. He saw her as someone fighting quietly, someone who carried burdens heavier than her smile revealed. As the morning crowd thinned, Michael noticed a boy slip inside. He was about 15, wearing an old hoodie and carrying a backpack that looked far too heavy. He walked straight to Angela, who greeted him with a hug and whispered something in his ear. The boy smiled faintly before sliding into a booth. Michael watched as Angela brought him a plate of pancakes without writing anything down. She didn't charge him at the register. Instead, she slipped her own tip money into the cash box to cover it. Michael realized instantly, this was her brother. The boy ate quickly, and Angela checked on him often, her eyes full of protective love. Michael couldn't stop staring at the scene. For the first time, pieces of the puzzle began to fit. She wasn't just working hard for herself, she was raising her younger brother, probably alone. When the boy finally left, waving goodbye to her before heading to school, Angela's face softened with pride. But as soon as he was gone, Michael saw her shoulders sag slightly, as if the strength she carried for him weighed double when she was alone. Michael waited until the cafe grew quieter again before walking up to the counter. Angela was wiping down a tray, humming quietly. "That was your brother, wasn't it?" Michael asked gently. Angela froze for a moment before nodding. "Yes, his name is David. He's 15. You take care of him," Michael said softly, not as a question but as a truth. Angela smiled, though it was faint. "Since our mother passed away, it's just been me and him. He's a good kid, smart, but life hasn't been fair to him either." Michael felt something shift inside him. The picture was clearer now. Angela wasn't just kind. She was carrying responsibilities far heavier than most people her age should. And yet she did it with dignity, never asking for pity. "I can see he means everything to you," Michael said. Angela nodded firmly. "He does. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he has a chance. I don't want him to grow up thinking the world will always be this hard. I want him to believe he can be more." Michael swallowed, his throat tight. Her words struck something deep within him. For years he had poured his energy into building companies, creating wealth, proving himself to the world. But in Angela's quiet fight for her brother, he saw a kind of strength money could never buy. "You're remarkable," Michael said softly. Angela shook her head quickly. "No, I'm just doing what I have to do. That doesn't make me remarkable. It just makes me surviving." But Michael knew she was more than surviving. She was shaping her brother's future with every small sacrifice she made. Before he could say more, the bell above the door rang again, and more customers walked in. Angela straightened her shoulders, put her smile back on, and moved gracefully into the rhythm of her work. Michael returned to his table, but he couldn't shake the image of her slipping her own money into the register for her brother's meal. It wasn't just kindness, it was sacrifice. As he finished his coffee, he made a decision. Angela's note had stopped him cold because it reminded him not to give up. But now he realized he couldn't just take those words and leave. He needed to be part of something greater. He needed to understand her story completely. When he left the cafe, he slipped one more generous tip into the jar, more than anyone would ever leave for a single cup of coffee. Angela noticed it but said nothing, only giving him the same polite thank you as always. Michael walked back through the streets of Richmond, the crisp air filling his lungs. For years he had hidden behind his empire, building walls between himself and the rest of the world. But now, one small-town waitress and her quiet note had broken those walls, and he couldn't deny it anymore. He needed to know Angela, not just the smile she gave the world, but the story behind it, because in her story, he had a feeling he might rediscover his own. The next few days, Michael kept returning to Mary's place. At first, he told himself it was only for the coffee. But deep inside, he knew the truth. It was for Angela. There was something about her presence that drew him in. Her smile wasn't just polite. It was real. Her kindness wasn't for show. It was part of who she was. And her quiet strength made him want to understand her more. Angela noticed his visits, too. At first, she thought it was strange that a man who looked like a traveler, someone just passing through, kept coming back every morning. But after a while, she grew used to his presence. He always sat at the same corner table, sipping his coffee slowly as if he had nowhere else to be. One afternoon, after the lunch rush had ended, the cafe grew quiet. Only a few customers lingered with laptops and books. Michael stayed, waiting until Angela had a moment to breathe. She leaned against the counter, wiping down a mug when he walked up. "You work too hard," Michael said gently. Angela gave a soft laugh. "Tell that to the bills. They don't stop just because I'm tired." Michael hesitated, then asked, "Can I take you for a walk after your shift? Just a walk, nothing more. I'd like to hear your story, not just watch it from this table." Angela studied him carefully. She had grown used to customers trying to make small talk or show interest in her life. But something in Michael's voice was different. He didn't sound curious for the sake of it. He sounded sincere. After a long pause, she nodded. All right, but only because you ask kindly. When her shift ended, they stepped out into the cool evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Richmond's streets were calm, with children playing on sidewalks and neighbors greeting each other warmly. They walked side by side in silence at first, until Michael said, "You once told me you can't let people see the cracks. I understand that. I've done it for years. But it can be heavy, can it?" Angela nodded slowly. "It is. But when you don't have anyone else to carry it, you just carry it alone." Michael looked at her. "What about your brother? David, you're strong for him, aren't you?" Her eyes softened at the mention of his name. "Yes, he deserves a better chance than what life gave us. He's smart, talented, but I worry. He's growing fast. Kids his age want things I can't always give. Shoes, gadgets, even time. I try, but sometimes I feel like I'm failing." Michael's chest tightened. He remembered his own younger years. The hunger to prove himself, the fear of not being enough. But unlike David, he had opportunities. He had people who invested in him. Angela was trying to give her brother all of that alone. "You're not failing," Michael said firmly. "From what I see, you're giving him everything that matters. Love, guidance, protection. That's worth more than anything else." Angela smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened with emotion. "Thank you. But sometimes love doesn't pay tuition or buy food. I work hard here, and I pick up cleaning jobs at night when I can. Still, it feels like we're always one step away from losing everything." Michael stopped walking for a moment, his heart heavy. He had built entire companies, made fortunes beyond imagination. Yet here was a woman who worked day and night just to keep her brother's world from collapsing. He wanted to tell her the truth, who he was, what he could do. He wanted to tell her she didn't have to struggle alone anymore. But he stayed quiet. Something told him Angela wasn't the type of person who wanted saving by money. She wanted understanding, respect. Instead, he said softly, "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." Angela laughed lightly, brushing away the weight of his words. "I don't feel strong most days, but thank you." They kept walking until they reached the edge of a small park. Children's laughter echoed from swings and slides, and the sound brought a soft smile to Angela's face. She sat on a bench and Michael sat beside her. For a long time, they simply watched the world around them. Then Angela asked quietly, "What about you, Michael? You never talk about yourself. Where are you from?" Michael hesitated. He had rehearsed lies so many times during this undercover journey. But looking at Angela's honest eyes, he couldn't bring himself to lie completely. "I'm from a world where people only see what you can give them," he said carefully. "I built something, worked hard for it, but in the process I lost sight of myself. I came here to remember what it means to just be a person again, not a title." Angela tilted her head, studying him. "That sounds lonely." Michael nodded. "It is. Sometimes the more you have, the more alone you feel." Angela didn't press further. She only said, "Maybe that's why you looked so heavy that first day. Maybe you needed someone to remind you that you're more than what you give the world." Her words struck him deeply. She had no idea how close she was to the truth. As the evening grew darker, Angela stood. "I should get home. David will be waiting." Michael rose too. "Can I walk you home?" Angela hesitated, but then nodded. They walked together through the quiet streets until they reached a small apartment building. The paint was chipped and the steps creaked, but there was warmth in the windows. "This is us," Angela said with a small smile. "It's not much, but it's home." Michael looked at the building, then back at her. "Home is where love is, and I think you've built plenty of that." Angela's cheeks warmed at his words. She nodded softly, then said, "Thank you for the walk." "And thank you for listening," Michael smiled. "Thank you for trusting me." She gave a small wave before disappearing inside, leaving Michael standing on the sidewalk, his heart heavier yet lighter at the same time. As he walked back to his motel, the note in his jacket pocket seemed to grow even more powerful. He understood now. It wasn't just Angela's words that had stopped him cold. It was her life, her sacrifices, her strength, and he knew this was no longer just about coffee. Angela had become the reason he wanted to stay. The following week, Michael became part of the rhythm at Mary's place. Every morning, he sat at his corner table with his black coffee. He didn't rush. He watched Angela move between tables with her graceful strength, and he listened to the small conversations that filled the cafe. At first, Some of the regular customers teased Angela about her new favorite customer. She only laughed it off, but deep down she noticed the truth too. Michael wasn't like other people who passed through town. He was careful with his words, gentle in his manner, and he carried a mystery that she couldn't quite explain. One Thursday afternoon, the cafe was quieter than usual. Rain tapped against the windows, and a few customers read books while sipping warm drinks. Michael sat with his coffee, watching the way Angela wiped down the counter, humming softly to herself. Suddenly the door opened, and David rushed in, dripping wet from the rain. His face was pale, and his shoulders slumped as though the weight of the world pressed down on him. Angela hurried toward him immediately. "David? What happened?" she asked, her voice full of worry. David shook his head, trying to hide his tears. I got in trouble at school." Angela pulled him aside, away from the other customers. Michael stayed seated but listened quietly, concern tightening his chest. "What kind of trouble?" Angela pressed gently. "They said I was late too many times. They said if I miss more classes, I might not be allowed to play on the basketball team anymore." His voice cracked. "It's not fair, Angela. I was late because I had to help you before school. I had to watch the little kids at Mrs. Brown's house until you finished your morning shift." Angela closed her eyes for a moment, guilt washing over her face. "Oh, David." Michael clenched his fists beneath the table. He could see the storm of responsibility weighing on both of them. David wanted to be a normal teenager, chasing his dreams while Angela was sacrificing everything to keep their little world together. Angela crouched down to her brother's level. "Listen to me. Don't blame yourself, okay? You're doing your best. I'll talk to your coach, maybe even the school. We'll figure this out." David looked up, his voice trembling. "I just want to play, Angela. Basketball is the only thing that makes me feel free." Her eyes softened, and she hugged him tightly. "You'll play. I promise. I'll find a way." Michael's heart ached as he watched. He had sat through boardroom battles worth billions, but nothing had ever moved him like this moment. A sister holding her brother, trying to be both parent and protector while hiding her own exhaustion. When David finally sat down with a hot chocolate that Angela quickly prepared, Michael stood and walked quietly to the counter. "Is everything all right?" he asked softly. Angela forced a small smile, but her eyes revealed the truth. "It's just life. David's struggling at school. He's good, really good, at basketball. But sometimes being late makes the teachers think he's not serious. They don't see the reasons. They don't see what he carries." Michael wanted to reach across the counter and take her hand to tell her she didn't have to do this alone. But instead he simply said, "Maybe they'll listen if you explain. Sometimes people just need to understand the story." Angela nodded, though her face showed doubt. "I'll try. I always try." Later that evening, as the cafe emptied, Michael offered to walk Angela and David home. The rain had stopped, and the streets glistened under the streetlights. David walked ahead, kicking at puddles, while Angela and Michael followed behind. "You love him so much," Michael said quietly. Angela's voice softened. "He's all I have left. After Mama passed, I promised I would never let him feel alone. Even when I'm tired, even when I'm scared, I keep going for him." Michael felt his chest tighten. "And who keeps going for you?" Angela looked at him, caught off guard by the question. She didn't answer right away. Finally, she whispered, "No one needs to. I'll be fine." But Michael knew the truth. Angela carried her own storms alone, and one day even the strongest needed shelter. When they reached the apartment, David bounded up the stairs. Angela lingered for a moment at the door. "Thank you for walking us," she said softly. Michael nodded. "Thank you for letting me. And Angela, don't forget, even the strongest people deserve someone to stand with them." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't brush his words aside. Instead, she gave a quiet smile and whispered, "Good night." That night, back in his motel room, Michael couldn't sleep. He thought about David's pain, Angela's sacrifices, and the way she carried more than any person should. He pulled out the note she had written him days ago and read it again. "Don't give up. The world still needs you." But now he understood something new. Angela wasn't just reminding him not to give up. She was living those words herself. She didn't give up on her brother, on her responsibilities, or on hope, even when everything around her told her to. Michael realized he couldn't just stay on the sidelines anymore. He couldn't keep sitting at the corner table, watching their lives unfold like a story. He wanted to step inside it. For the first time in years, Michael knew what he wanted. He wanted to help Angela and David. Not with money. Not yet. Not until they trusted him. But with presence, with care, with the kind of support that couldn't be bought. Because in their strength, he had found something worth more than all the empires he had built. It was another quiet morning in Richmond, but for Michael, it felt different. Today wasn't just another visit to Mary's place. Today, he knew he had to take the next step, not just as a customer, not just as a friend observing from a distance, but as someone who wanted to be part of Angela and David's world. He arrived early as usual and took his corner seat. Angela noticed him immediately and offered her familiar warm smile. But today there was something in Michael's eyes, a seriousness, a quiet determination that made her pause. "Good morning," she said, setting his coffee down. "Good morning," he replied, his voice calm. "Angela, I need to talk to you. Can we step outside for a moment after your shift?" Angela looked at him cautiously. She had grown to trust his quiet kindness, but this tone carried weight. She nodded. "All right." After work. The day passed slowly, each hour feeling longer to Michael. He watched Angela work tirelessly, managing tables, greeting customers, and caring for everyone who walked in. And he watched the moments she slipped, the small sighs, the brief touches to her wrist as if to ease invisible pain. Each gesture reminded him why he had come back. Not for coffee, not for small talk, but for the chance to stand beside someone whose strength inspired him. When her shift ended, Angela wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside. The sky was soft with the colors of late afternoon, the sun filtering through the clouds like a quiet blessing. Michael waited beside her. "You said you wanted to talk," she said, her voice gentle yet curious. Michael nodded. "Yes, I want to be honest with you, Angela, about who I am and why I've been here." Angela raised an eyebrow, waiting. Michael took a deep breath. "My name is Michael Thompson. I'm a businessman. Wealthy, yes. Billionaire, actually. But I didn't come here for business. I came here because I needed to remember what it meant to be human. And then I met you." Angela blinked, unsure if she should laugh, cry, or run. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. She studied him carefully. "All this time, you were hiding it?" "Yes," Michael said softly. "Not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I wanted you to see me as a person, not as a title or a number. I wanted to know your world, to understand what courage really looks like." Angela's chest tightened. Her first instinct was caution, but she could see the honesty in his eyes. He wasn't showing off his wealth. He wasn't trying to impress. He was simply telling the truth. "You could have told me earlier," she said quietly. Michael shook his head. "I wanted to earn your trust first. And more than that, I wanted to see the strength you carry every day. I wanted to see you, not a story, not a headline, but you." Angela swallowed hard. "You've been here. For me, for you, and for David. I've watched how hard you fight for him, how much you sacrifice. And I want to help, not just with words, but in real ways. If you let me." Angela looked down, torn. She had spent years learning to depend on no one, carrying every burden herself. Letting someone in, especially someone she hardly knew, felt dangerous. But Michael's eyes held sincerity she couldn't ignore. I don't know," she admitted softly. "It's hard to trust people." Michael nodded, understanding completely. "I know. But I promise you, I won't change who you are, and I won't take away the control you have over your life. I only want to help you lift some of the weight so you and David can breathe." Angela's eyes glistened. She wanted to believe him, and yet fear held her back. Finally, she whispered, I'll think about it." Michael reached out, offering a small, supportive hand. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." For the next few weeks, Michael became a quiet presence in their lives, not as a savior, but as a partner. He helped with small things, arranging tutoring for David, bringing groceries, and repairing things in their apartment that had broken long ago. Slowly, Angela began to see that his help didn't come with strings or expectations. It came from care, and it came from respect. One afternoon, Michael walked Angela and David home from the cafe again. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of autumn leaves. David skipped ahead, laughing as he chased a fallen leaf down the sidewalk. Angela watched him, and then she glanced at Michael, a small smile forming. "You've done a lot for us," she said softly. Michael shrugged, smiling. "I've done nothing compared to what you do every day." But I'm glad to be here, Angela nodded. Thank you, really. Michael looked at her, his expression earnest. Angela, I know trust is hard, and I know life has made you strong in ways most people can't understand. But I want you to know, you don't have to carry everything alone anymore. Not unless you want to. Tears filled Angela's eyes, but she didn't hide them this time. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Michael said gently. Just let me be here. That's enough. In that quiet moment, the weight Angela had carried for so long seemed a little lighter. The world didn't feel as cold. She didn't feel as alone. And for the first time, she realized that asking for help didn't make her weak. It made her human. Later that evening, Michael sat in his motel room, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the note Angela had slipped him weeks ago, the one that had stopped him cold in the cafe. Don't give up. The world still needs you. Now he understood fully. Angela had given him more than words. She had reminded him why life mattered, why compassion mattered, and why human connection was more powerful than any fortune. And now he had the chance to give something back, to help her and David build the life they deserved. The next morning, Michael returned to the cafe. Angela noticed him right away, but this time there was no hesitation. She met him with a warm smile and a quiet nod of acknowledgement. Words were not needed. They had both come to understand each other. As the day passed, they worked side by side in small ways, Michael helping carry trays, Angela laughing softly at his awkward attempts. David played in the corner with friends, safe and happy. And in that simple rhythm, Michael realized something profound. Life's true value wasn't in power, money, or titles. It was in the quiet moments of connection, in the courage to care, and in the willingness to stand beside someone when they needed it most. Angela glanced at Michael, noticing the warmth in his presence and the calm in his eyes. For once, she didn't feel the weight of the world pressing down on her. She felt hope, and Michael knew that in helping her, he had also healed something inside himself. The note that had stopped him cold now felt like a guidepost, a reminder that even in a world full of struggles, there were people who mattered, people who could lift each other, and people whose strength inspired others to keep going. Angela, Michael, and David, 3 lives once weighed down by loneliness and struggle, were now connected by trust, care, and the quiet power of kindness. And in that connection, all 3 found something priceless: hope. For Michael, it was not just the end of his undercover journey. It was the beginning of a life he had never expected, filled with purpose, humanity, and the kind of bond that could never be bought. And for Angela, it was proof that even the strongest hearts could find help, even the hardest struggles could find relief, and even the quietest acts of courage could change a life. Sometimes, in ways that could stop someone cold and start them anew. The sun set over Richmond that evening, casting a warm glow on the small cafe, on the streets, and on the 3 lives it had touched. And in that light, Michael, Angela, and David knew something essential. Together, they could face whatever came next, because some moments, some people, and some acts of courage were bigger than money, bigger than power. They were life-changing. And in that quiet town, in that small cafe, life had quietly changed forever.